Good morning, everyone. Really good to see everyone this morning. Before I hand you off to David to talk about what we're talking about today, around SocialFi, I just wanted to run through a couple of things, BIMA related, that I think you guys should be aware of. We've got a ton of stuff coming up in October and early November, so I think it's important that it's on your agenda. There will be an email about this going out after, but I just wanted to run through it very, very quickly. Hopefully you can see my lovely little animation of hopefully it's playing in front of you now. So we've got a ton of stuff coming up. We've got our awards ceremony. We've got our members undercover in January, some really big programs, Digital Day in November. But there's three specific things I want to mention today. One of those being our innovation exchange that we're hosting on the 17th of October. So basically, our BIMA's Innovation Council has been doing some fantastic work recently around the innovation exchange. So basically, it's been 4 sessions over the year, looking at MVPs and the different kind of processes behind it and different parts of when it comes to building an MVP. And they're having their final session on the 17th of October, and that's on scaling an MVP. So that'll be their 4th session, and then we'll actually have a drinks event at the end of the year to sort of celebrate the output. So the idea is that they do these sessions and then they produce a PDF showing their findings. I'd really recommend that if you are in the innovation space or the tech space and want to speak to some really interesting people, some good brands as well. We've had in the past with people from Coca-Cola there before, for example. I'd really recommend coming on to that. That is done online. You'll get a link in the follow-up email, so definitely take a look at that. Another really cool event that we're doing 2 days later, on the 19th, I should say, is the BIMA and 30 Masterclass, which is on generative AI. So basically, we run a masterclass every single month with members. If you want some more information about running your own masterclass, give us a shout on that as well. But for this month, we've got one coming up all around generative AI and machine learning APIs in practice. So if you're in the space or want to learn more about the space and get a really in-depth, interactive kind of masterclass on that, completely free for members, just follow the link that will be in that follow-up email. And finally, kind of the big thing I wanted to put you on to, I'm sure some of you have heard this before. We launched it very recently. We've got a BIMA Leadership and Management Academy in partnership with Impact Futures running at the moment, which is basically Impact Futures have got some government funding and they came to us so we can provide our members with fully funded training around leadership and management. So if you've got people in your team that you want to sort of kind of bump up through leadership and management courses and training, it's all kind of really official stuff. Like I said, it's government funded training with that. So just give us a shout, register your interest, and we can send you a pack on next steps. And this is a no-brainer to sort of get your team on. So if you need more information, obviously give us a shout. But as I said, they'll be in that follow-up email. I'll start waffling on. I'd like to hand stuff over now to David, who will be breaking down what you're really here for, which is, of course, is SocialFi. So David, good friend of BIMA, do you want to take over?
I'll take it away. Right, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for okay. I'm hoping that you can see slides. And is that showing okay?
Yeah, all good.
Great stuff. So look, here's what I promised you. I promised that we would talk about what happens when Web3 meets social media, what happens when the identities that are part of cryptocurrency networks do more than just becoming senders or receivers of transactions, and what else we could store in our wallets. And then move on to thinking about some of the experiences and opportunities that they kind of bring along and open up. So without further ado, let's see if I can hit the brief. So I'm going to cover what is SocialFi, what does being on chain change about social, how do the things that are different about being on chain change the experiences that we can then have, and what opportunities that might there be out there. What I want to do is race through this quite quickly because we're already nearly 10 minutes in. I'd like to leave some room for discussion. So shout, and if I don't see your comment, then please just come on audio and interrupt me, and I'll bias for speed and conversation. All right, so what is SocialFi? it is referred to variously as SocialFi, Web3 social, decentralized social, or on-chain social. This is an example of it. It's probably the most famous example at the moment. This is Friend Tech, and it is a way to buy keys for other users on social. So it's linked to X or Twitter, and when you buy a key, it grants you access to a private chat room, but it also allows you to become a shareholder in somebody. So if somebody's, I guess, social status or perceived social value goes up, then your keys become worth more. And so you can invest in people that you think are going to become more popular, and increase the amount of money that you have. It uses bonding curve economics like EasyJet, things more spicy, and it's built on Base, which is Coinbase's layer 2, which is built on the Optimism OP stack superchain. So if you want to talk about any of that tech stuff, we can, but it's pretty basic right now, but the team are iterating really quickly. So it's just a progressive web app, and you fund your wallet with some crypto, sign up on the site, connect your Twitter, and then you can buy and sell people's keys. It gives you access to private chat rooms and stuff. So really what this is a move from social to socio-economic. That's the bottom line. I really liked this take on it, which is yeah, self-explanatory, I think. So what does on-chain actually change? What's different about it? So this is how people experience digital economy. It is app specific. So we go into an app to do a thing, and everything within that experience sort of stays within that app. So you have a bunch of stuff in. So these are automatic, my employer's products. So you've got like a WordPress app, you've got a bunch of stuff that you do in there. On WordPress, you've got Pocket Casts, you listen to some audiobooks in there. You've got your WooCommerce store, and you manage your orders and stuff in there. But they're kind of totally separate. Perhaps you use the same identity to log into each of those services, but certainly you can't see, for example, your WooCommerce orders in your Pocket Casts app or your Tumblr. So everything's siloed. The content that you interact with, your identity, largely, even if it's not your authentication, it's like the personal data and what hangs off your identity. Your graph of connections to people and other things is in the silo, and any activity that you take, so liking, favoriting, connecting, tends to stay within that silo too. So if you look at these, instead of being like round shiny buttons, if you kind of 3Dify them and imagine them to be silos, that's kind of the point I'm making. And Web3 changes what we can do there. So this is sort of one of the popular takes on Web3, is it adds ownership to the read-write web of Web2. And specifically, it allows us to own our actual profile, so our handle, our @handle, the data that's associated with that, the graph of connections that we have to other people within that network, the content that we produce, the contracts that govern the network, which client we use, and how that is governed. So that's kind of what I just said there, but hopefully this will be useful afterwards. So yeah, we can kind of own everything to some extent, even if it's through joint ownership via votes. So with Lens protocol, which is one of the leading Web3 social networks, your profiles are tokens, so you can buy and sell your profile on OpenSea, just like any other NFT. That's how I got mine, because I missed the whitelist. And obviously, well, not obviously, but profiles have different values. You know, if you've built up a ton of followers and a ton of social influence, then your profile is worth more than others. So having an open marketplace for profiles is kind of interesting. The content itself is tokenized. So each post that goes out onto Lens is a token that you can collect. Sometimes you can collect them for free, and sometimes they come with a fee. So this one, for example, would cost $1.44 to collect, but it then becomes an NFT. that you can do with what you want. And the relationship, so our graph and the relationships between us and our followers are also tokens. So it is really a case of tokens all the way down. How does that change experiences? Well, really what it does, I think, is open up this idea of transaction for us to be able to act across different apps and experiences in new and powerful ways. So one example of this is that Web3 social protocols are designed to become open protocols, just like Bitcoin and Ethereum are permissionless protocols that anyone can build a client and connect to. That's true also with Web3 social. Some of these are not yet open source or kind of permissionless, but that's more a facet of like this being early rather than it being the end state. So it means that anyone can build a client to access the protocol. So if you imagine at the moment you need to use Twitter's client to use Twitter to create relationships, to access content, etc. Something like Lens can have many different clients, all looking at the same content, the same graph, but using that data to provide different experiences client side. So it's this unbundling of the client protocol. It's pretty interesting. You can choose what you connect to your profile because it's permissionless. There's no difference in Web3 social between sending a message or money. Well, like text or value, I guess they're all just messages. And you know, that also translates to posting as well. So you can post content or a vote. And one thing that's kind of important is that whenever we interact with Twitter or Facebook, we are using an experience that is modulated by opaque corporate algorithms, and they will introduce things like artificial reach limiting so that they can drive the creator to monetize with ads. They will do all sorts of things, some of which are very healthy, like down limiting harmful content, blocking other accounts, etc. But they're not transparent rules, and there are plenty of examples of people being deplatformed, both for good and bad reasons, from protocols. So permissionless protocol-based networks don't have that stuff. Anything that is a constraint or a rule is transparently defined in the protocol. And what this really means is that it's not that there's no limit to coordination, it's more that we can collectively choose the limits to coordination that there are. But it means that we can use these platforms to build companies, to build audience, to build a living, and we can own all of that. We can't do that with today's social media because you can be deplatformed, you can have your content restricted, all of those things. All right, so this bit is a little bit kind of dry and theoretical, but I think it's a useful framework in how to think about this going forwards. So if we think back to the sort of list of things that you can own and simplify it down, you've got profiles, clients, transactions, connections, content, and contracts, and we can just swap these out. So we can say whatever the profile is in the context of whatever client, it can perform a transaction by way of a connection in the form of a certain type of content under a particular set of rules. So for example, if I'm using Twitter, my public profile on X's app is going to perform a super follow request to the BIMA account in the form of an API submission under X's terms of service, right? That is a way to abstract out these things. I'm kind of keeping it in an artificial order just to make it make sense. But we can also do other things. So for example, my profile in Farcaster, which is another Web3 social app, can broadcast to my followers in the form of an NFT mint notification, like I've just minted this NFT, and perhaps that's governed by the transparent terms of promoting NFTs through affiliate marketing on Farcaster, which means that if I say, hey, look, I've just minted this, and somebody uses my specific notification to then go on a mint, maybe I own 5% of that transaction. Similarly, like from LinkedIn, I could make a vote in a DAO, subject to the MakerDAO governance rules. So I hope that that's kind of useful, and you can infinitely connect and recombine these things. It's not just all of these things all the time in that order, but as a sort of framework, I found it helpful. What opportunities might this create? Well, as I say, these are the sort of 6 things I think we get to play around with, and just very broadly, here are the sorts of things that fall under there. So profiles, client, transactions, connections, content, and contracts. And obviously these are like the big buckets, but you can break those right down and do what you like with them. So some more specific opportunities are around content tokenization, which I think is not directly Web3 social, but it is sort of an implicit part of it, because if you are going to have Web3 social, you have to tokenize content. And if you're going to tokenize content, you can also build in the monetization for it. So on the right, we've got like, you can think of it as like bundles of content that are a certain size. So a book could be thought of as a bunch of blog posts stitched together, or a movie could be thought of as a bunch of TikTok or Instagram reels stitched together. A newspaper is like a bunch of tweets stitched together. Same with audiobooks and podcasts. Now, we are happy to pay for these things on the right. You know, we buy books, we buy newspapers, we buy audiobooks, but we don't buy the things on the left, because the existing payment methods like Visa or Amex, it doesn't work for them to process transactions of this size. There's just not enough value compared to their cost base to do it. But it's also the friction. Like, can you imagine having to go through a credit card checkout experience to buy access to one podcast? Like, would you bother? Probably not. But when you are within an app that is already connected to your wallet and your wallet is already funded, then collecting a piece of content is no different in experience than liking it. So you drop the friction right out of it. And because crypto is much more cost effective to transact and infinitely divisible, you can have these microtransactions. And this is at the human level, let alone at the kind of automated agent or bot level. Another really interesting thing I think this opens up is incentivized participation. So you can think of it as gamification. And here we've got like a bunch of different crypto gamification platforms. You can also look to things like Duolingo. I think more and more as the battle for people's attention heats up, we're going to see incentivized participation becoming more important. And that participation, I think, often looks like education or learning or some other form of meaningful engagement with a brand. So we call these lots of different things: loyalty points. You can think of like Starbucks or Nike or your hotel points. You can think of it as streaks, like, I don't know, your journaling streak. You can access different tiers. Again, that might be like airline frequent flyer programs. Whitelist is more of a kind of mint NFT terminology, and so is airdrops for crypto. But I think we're going to see a bundling of all these different ideas together. And certainly we can look to things like Duolingo, which are incredibly successful, and think about how brands might increasingly use that sort of micro-learning certification award paradigm to educate people about how to use their product and to get them to keep using it. Another broad opportunity trend, I think, is that you can suddenly start bundling everything together into a feed. So whether it's a bit of communication, whether it is like this person just connected with this organization or this group, whether it is this person's just learnt this thing, just played in this game, just got this job or just participated in this project, has bought these stocks or shares or crypto assets, or has made this money through a sale. I think crypto wallets, Web3 wallets allow you to show all of that stuff. Everything is just a wallet, a token action, and you can build feeds around those tokens. So if we imagine like a token can represent anything from an NFT to a gold bar to a university degree to the keys to your car or a hotel, then whenever those tokens move, we can build a feed of that activity, because a token moves in or out between one wallet and another on a certain date and time, and we can see what other people have done. So here on this right-hand screenshot, we can see that a bunch of other people have minted a particular NFT. So I might be like, well, I've got some FOMO, that looks pretty cool, I'm going to go mint that as well. So it turns this sort of investing or speculating game from an individual one to a social one. And of course, I kind of touched on this earlier, if you build in some Web2 economics around that, affiliate marketing, viral marketing, multi-level marketing, then you're going to see this really interesting socio-economic space open up. One thing that I'm particularly interested in is collectible content. So going back to this idea that apps are silos, and again, these are apps that my company Automatic builds. So Pocket Casts, we can star podcasts, we can like things on Tumblr, we can like things on WordPress, and we can favorite particular entries in our day one journals. Like, what if we bundled all of those things together? Why can't I see all of my favorite content in one place? Why do I not have one personal content library that I can use to train an AI, or even just some advanced algorithms to say, okay, well, look, I liked all of this stuff enough to bother collecting it into my personal library. What else is out there on the web that I might like? So it adds a much more sort of 3D and rich, I guess, data space to do analysis and algorithmic content suggestion. But there's also this other really compelling part of this, which is, at the moment, if I like a podcast or I like a post on Tumblr, then that might produce, in some apps, that will produce like an opportunity for the content creator to connect with me. Like, I can see who's liked or commented on my things on Tumblr. I don't think you can on Pocket Casts as an author go and see like who starred my episodes. But why not? Why should we not open up that connection between a creator and a consumer, so that if I like somebody's post on a WordPress site, then I can also discover content that they're producing on Tumblr or podcasts that they've been on Pocket Casts. That's my dog barking. Thanks, dog. So, and that connection can be really rich, because it's just about it's not just about content discovery, it's about messaging, and it's about the value transaction. So it means that I can tip a particular content creator, I can experience access to exclusive content across all of their different content creation platforms. So this, I think, unlocks a lot of richness for content creators that are currently unavailable through these experiences. There are also a bunch of these other opportunities. So we've got everything from paradigms, so the idea of collecting a piece of content instead of providing a gate upfront, so that I can experience a piece of content and then choose to collect it to my library rather than having to pay up front and hope that I like it. I think that's a nice way of thinking about content experiences. Add to that micro monetization, so the idea that I might like something 10 cents, but I might not like it $10. I think that's interesting. I think taking the creator economy and allowing it to be unconstrained and making them more into circular economies is really interesting. So instead of the majority of the value extraction on YouTube going back to Google, what if that went into a fund to help reward or promote content creators to create more content? There's no reason for there to be a corporate extraction behind these social platforms, which are increasingly just part of our everyday lives as humans. Because these protocols are open and permissionless, anyone can see who's interacted with a particular account, whether that's an NFT minting address or a brand's account or an individual's account. That means that the data that is within that chain, the graphs that that data creates, and any analysis that you can do of that becomes open. So in an open permissionless protocol, I can see which addresses have interacted with other brand addresses, and I can address those directly. So instead of having all this siloed data or pay to play through advertising on Facebook or Google, it means that anyone that's got the smarts can figure out their own segmentation or personalization and outreach directly through to those addresses. Again, like private or public messaging is just the same as sending a crypto transaction once you've got this cryptographic network stood up. And sorry, this is kind of like me reading a slide, which I hate to do, but there's just a lot of stuff that I didn't really know how to illustrate, and hopefully some of this we can break out into conversation in a minute. So yeah, any experience that you've got an app for at the moment, I think you can add new facets to. So there's a few examples there. We can add in these programmable socioeconomics via contracts, whether it's royalties or viral marketing. We can allow the audience and the promoters to share some of the end profits. We've seen Meta and Twitter move into this sort of verified profile space that, like the blue check shenanigans on X. I think you can take that as a signal and extrapolate that out. So you can ask people to either pay or stake to do various actions within a network. So staking is this idea that like Twitter could introduce a rule, and it could say, right, you have to have $100 in your Twitter balance. And if a bunch of people report you for transgressing one of the rules of the platform, then we reserve the right to fine you. Yeah, or you can earn through contributing to the network somehow. So it's this idea that you can introduce even kind of very low cost for doing certain transactions, and it can cut down bad behavior quite significantly. So for example, if each email costs like 1/10 of a cent to receive, or even 1,000, then it would put a lot of email spammers out of business because the economics are suddenly changed. But you can also see that, I think you can see that if you are on Twitter now and trying to engage meaningfully, and you're a high profile account, there's just a lot of bot and troll activity. And it's really hard to know how to address that without introducing some economics into it that build a bit of buffer between human actors and agents. We talked a little bit about this idea that you can separate your identity and onwards graph from the client. So it's at a protocol level, and you can take your identity, your content, your experiences, your connections from client to client. And this idea that you can buy and sell profiles is just part of an open marketplace. And I think really what this all adds up to is that if we use our imagination, it's a new way for us to collaborate. If there's anything that we want to do, if it's building a company, if it's building a form of governance for an organization, we can do all of those things. We can support our favorite creators, we can build a living, and it is up to us how we define those rules. It's not up to anyone else. So like that's the end of the deck. And I hope there is a bunch of stuff to talk about, because I've whizzed through that as promised. let's do some Q&A. Shout out if you got questions, come on voice, or put them in the chat. Did that make sense? Like you all just shocked? You were asleep? Okay. And says you can't speak as you are attendees. Okay, in that case, let me look at the Q&A tab. Cool. So Tom is asked here, what should people try first to learn further? That's a good question. A lot of these are kind of whitelist only, or they're not kind of open access yet. I think Farcaster is due to open up to public access soon. Lens Protocol, I think, are going to release more profiles, but if you wanted to buy a profile on OpenSea, you can do that. I think Lens is a really well polished one, and I really like Farcaster. Those are two good ones. You can also check out though mirror.xyz, so mirror.xyz. That's a Web3 publishing platform. It's not exactly a social network, but it has a lot of the same components. So you can mint a post on Mirror, you can subscribe. So I guess it's like a social content platform for longer form content, and that one's open. You can crack on and play there. Yeah, but between those three, I think you're probably getting some way. In terms of wallet experiences, you could also check out dbank. So if you've got a crypto wallet, you can connect it to dbank. And whilst it's primarily a wallet experience, it will show you what's in your portfolio. You also get access to this idea of a stream, which is that you can follow other people's wallets, you can follow what they post, you can see what transactions they're making. So I think that's interesting to look at it from a different perspective. So coming from a more financial portfolio experience into a social feed. So that's dbank, which is DEBANK. So hopefully those are a few good starting points. Hillary, this is an easy one. Yes, absolutely. You can share the deck. And yes, sorry if I talked too quickly on that one. And I'm not going to pronounce your name because I'm probably going to get it wrong, but thank you for the question. Do you think organic social will essentially be paid for with Web3? I think that's a good question. I don't know whether I would say it becomes paid for. I think it becomes socio-economic. So there's no reason that you couldn't net out to be totally neutral. So there might be this sort of financial layer that sits behind transactions, but that could be receive as well as send. So I guess for a lot of users, they'll net out to be neutral. They'll post content, people will interact, they'll earn a modest degree, and that will supplement or pay for anything that they want to do online. You're going to get the content creators who are making a living, and obviously somebody has to pay for that. So yeah, I think I can imagine a world where a lot of socio becomes linked to transactions, but it's not necessarily then going to be like a pay-to-play experience. It's going to be more like a richer playing field where there'll always be some places that are free to interact and free to transact, but you might well want to upgrade to see the ad-free version or to access some exclusive accounts or content. So I think it's, with a lot of this stuff, it's not about will this change from that to the other. It's more like, what are the new things that we will add to the existing things in terms of experiences? That's the way I try and think about it. I think everything just gets a little bit more complicated going forwards. I hope that answers that one. Follow-up questions are very welcome as well. Cool. Tommy, your question, you spoke briefly about risk, but what are the implications of SocialFi and everything you just mentioned for people or communities with little or no money, or people who already struggle to monetize content? Yeah, it's a great question. I would see it as a net positive. I mean, it's hard to foresee this stuff, but if you can get access to a platform in the first place, so that could be one barrier. I can imagine that they're going to be like free to access or very low cost to access social networks. Many of them might be the existing Web2 ones, right? I don't think Facebook or Twitter or Insta are going away. It remains to be seen whether they'll choose to add some of this financial stuff in as well. But let's imagine that you can get onto the social network in the first place, and that won't be true for all social networks. I think we'll probably see the emergence of like these very exclusive, high-tier, paid kind of private groups. I mean, we already see that with Web2, but I think Web3 provides just another way to do that. So if you can get access to the network in the first place, then the Web3 social platforms that will do well are presumably those which are creating good outcomes for their users. So if nobody can afford to interact, or the incentives for good or bad behavior aren't well refined, then people will stop using those platforms. So I think it's allowing market forces, as sort of weird a concept it is to talk about that in terms of social media, it's allowing the open market to decide like what is valuable or not. So if you are struggling to monetize content and it's because you don't have any audience, that's one problem. Maybe this can help with, because more people can get access to an open network. You don't need official government ID or whatever. If it's because you are producing content that is too small to monetize effectively, you're writing blog posts instead of books, I think this gives you more options, because the scale of value can be much bigger. So if you're a creator within a poorer community, then the price point can just be lower, whereas there's a hard floor at the moment. And if you're struggling to monetize content because it's just like bad content that nobody cares about, I don't think that technology solves for that problem. So there are aspects to Web3 social that does change the dynamic of people being able to access a platform, create content, create an audience, and monetize it. And there are obviously components that are unaffected by technology. I hope that makes sense. It's a really interesting question. Happy to talk more on that one. I sort of get that giving. So this is Tommy's follow-up. I sort of get that giving could be quite easily built into the model, so people could ideally identify and give to those communities like crowdfunding already exists. Yeah, that's a great point. And if you look at Optimism, so Optimism is like an Ethereum layer 2, and they have this idea of retroactive public goods funding. So if you build something on Optimism or any of the chains that are built with OP Stack, and it is generating fees for Optimism, some of those fees go back into this public goods funding pool, and then every quarter you can submit a proposal, or you can apply for a grant, a retroactive funding grant, to say, I think I deserve some of this money, or I think this person deserves some of this money because, and then that gets voted on. So every transaction on the network helps generate value for the network. And then there's this value distribution mechanism called retroactive public goods funding, where that money can be sent to people that have created value on the network already. presumably that also works for investing in people that are promising to add more value. So that's one funding mechanism. The other one is quadratic funding, and this is being led really by Gitcoin. So Git, the version control system, so GIT coin, and they have funding rounds. And the idea is that they've structured the funding with match funding from donors, so that if you want some money to do something, it might be education, it might be development, might be community, might be anything, you can put a proposal there and people can come along and donate, and whatever people donate is matched by funding from other sources. So like Optimism might divert some of their retroactive public goods funding into a Gitcoin fund, for example. And the nature of quadratic funding is that it optimizes for like the minority votes. So if you've got 90% of people want to give all their money to one particular project, then it can become very centralized. So quadratic funding says, like, if you've only got a few donations, we'll match that more highly than we would an already well-funded and popular project. So I think it's a great follow-up point from you. And one of the things to bear in mind is like socio-economic design, like adding value into these social networks allows us to do some really interesting things with aggregating and distributing funding. And yeah, thanks for coming along, everyone. Appreciate it.